Churchill makes this, I think, politically brave broadcast to the British nation, explaining that no one has been a more steadfast opponent of Stalin and the Soviets for his entire political career. But when it comes down to political monsters, Hitler is worse than Stalin, and therefore we're going to side with Stalin against Hitler. He gives this groundbreaking broadcast, and this is the beginnings of this famous wartime relationship, which will just about last the course of the war. But there are going to be many, many mountains to climb. There's going to be many disasters. Many things are going to go wrong, and the relationship is going to break up almost on a number of occasions, and it's going to be saved by the trio of individuals who sort of form the heart of the narrative in my book.
What you know as a historian, what's weird about life is we read it, and it's almost like a Hollywood script for us. So this was the obvious thing that happened. But what you know as a historian, there's so many improbable things that happen to make certain outcomes, right? One is, Lord Halifax has to say he doesn't want to be prime minister, right? He's the first choice after Neville Chamberlain leaves. Churchill was a controversial figure prior to the war, flamboyant, credible writer, gifted orator, but he's a drinker. He's got people upset. He likes telling people the truth, right, Giles? He tells people the truth about the Nazis that people don't like. That people don't like hearing the truth, right, Giles?
And here's one of the big problems, that Churchill is going to find himself in a personal relationship with Joseph Stalin, who is a man he's detested for his entire political career. He called Stalin's Soviet regime, he described them as a league of failures, the criminals, the morbid and the deranged. Winston Churchill, when he was Minister of War in Minister of Munitions in 1919, he sent the British Army, British troops into Soviet Russia to try and crush this regime in its very earliest days. So now, bizarrely, Churchill finds himself in a wartime relationship with Joseph Stalin, and he needs someone who's able to manage this relationship, because it's a very, very uncomfortable bedfellows that these two men make, and of course they're going to be joined by Roosevelt as well as to form the big three relationship that will last throughout the course of the Second World War.
So let's go to Mr. Stalin for a second. He's a very complex guy. He's a ruthless murderer. He's a thug. He rises to take power after Lenin. He takes out Trotsky. He eliminates people. He's literally cutting them out of pictures and shooting people. But he's also a little bit nervous guy. He's got a plane. Every time the Germans are heading towards Moscow, he flies himself to his dacha on the Black Sea. When his army is repelling the Germans, he flies back and kills all the people that knew that he flew there. He's a nervous, paranoid guy, right?
He's
different guy from Churchill. Why don't you set the personalities up for us? Churchill's a little bit more revealing, a little bit more open of a soul, right?
Churchill, I'm sure many of your listeners will be familiar. He's from an aristocratic background, an old-style British aristocrat with a fantastic education, classical background. Stalin could not be more different. Stalin is the son of a wife-beating father, a drunkard. Stalin very early on was a gangster. He robbed banks down in Georgia, where he comes from. But he's also an almost unknown figure, even in the Soviet Union. He never gives radio addresses. He's never seen in public. So very few people know anything about him. And certainly Churchill and the ministers in Britain knew nothing about Stalin, other than the fact that he is a brutal monster who's liquidated millions of his own subjects. And so, when Churchill decides he's going to go form a political partnership, a wartime partnership with Stalin against Hitler, this is a pretty hard thing to sell, not only to his own ministers, but to the British public. And so what Churchill does on the very day that Hitler invades the Soviet Union, Churchill makes this, I think, politically brave broadcast to the British nation, explaining that, no one has been a more steadfast opponent of Stalin and the Soviets for his entire political career. But, when it comes down to political monsters, Hitler is worse than Stalin, and therefore we're going to side with Stalin against Hitler. So he gives this groundbreaking broadcast, and this is the beginnings of this famous wartime relationship, which will just about last the course of the war. But there are going to be many, many mountains to climb. There's going to be many disasters. Many things are going to go wrong, and the relationship is going to break up almost on a number of occasions, and it's going to be saved by the trio of individuals who sort of form the heart of the narrative in my book.